Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
A fascinating and a very important argument or conversation has been triggered by Bihar election results. This is about one individual named Asaduddin Owaisi, his party, All India Majlis-e-Ittihadul Muslimin, but also about 19 to 20 crore fellow Indians, namely India's Muslims. Now, what is the argument and what is the issue? The issue is a complaint from this traditional so-called secular parties, more prominently the Congress party, but also others, saying that AIMIM, that is Owaisi's party, contested in seats which had the secular vote and divided the secular vote, ultimately benefiting the BJP. Now, you can use data to cut it this way or cut it that way. You can say that, oh look, he won 5 seats. If he had not contested, maybe the Mahagathbandhan would have won 6 seats. But the fact is that if Mahagathbandhan was really close to power, then Owaisi would never have gone with the BJP. Chances are that he would have gone with the Mahagathbandhan in the final analysis if there was an opportunity, but he would have asked for his pound of flesh, which is perfectly normal and acceptable in politics. Now, the other allegation is that he is actually an agent of the BJP, that he is funded by the BJP, that he works for the BJP, that he then puts up his candidates everywhere to take away the Muslim vote, or we use a euphemism in Indian politics or political discussion, we say he divides the secular vote. What it means is he divides the vote of those parties that have claims to be secular and that then think that they have a right or ownership over the Muslim vote. So he comes in as competition. He did that in Maharashtra. He has now done this in Bihar. Now, in the past when he did that, it did not evoke such a strong negative response, because he usually came a cropper. In 2015 also he put up his candidates in Bihar, but he came a cropper. In fact, his candidates lost their deposit. I took notice of that in a national interest that I wrote then, saying that BJP's aggressive anti-Muslim talk, there will be celebrations in Pakistan. Pakistan mein people will light crackers if the BJP loses in Bihar. That was said, and many other awful things were said at that point about Muslims in Bihar in that election campaign. So in fact, I am sharing 4 articles that I have written on this issue, 4 national interest articles in the past 5 years, and you can then see how this political question has evolved. So where are we now? So 2015, when he put up his candidates, they lost their deposits because people thought, Muslims also thought, it was best to stay with those who were tried and tested, that is RJD and the Congress, because they had protected the Muslims in the past, RJD in particular. So that didn't change, he failed. But ever since he began to get success in other states other than his little island of Hyderabad or inner city of Hyderabad, it caused concern. So he won 2 assembly seats in Maharashtra. That was seen as throwing the gauntlet at Congress and NCP. Okay, beta, you think you have this Muslim vote here, now I am also a claimant, and see, Muslims are voting for me in Aurangabad, and I am also putting up educated modern Muslim candidates, young. In fact, his candidate that won in Aurangabad is a former journalist from NDTV. So that was the beginning. Now in Bihar, he has won these 5 seats, and obviously he has shown that Muslims in this region called Simachal of Bihar, which has almost 33-35%, if not more, Muslim vote, which is about the same Muslim vote percentage as say in West Bengal or in Assam, then they prefer him to RJD and Congress. So many of them, not all, so many of them. It tells you that now these parties, the traditional secular parties, have competition for the Muslim vote. They cannot take it for granted. And that is what has led to this big commotion and this heartburn. Now, where does this begin? Where does this end? What does it mean? So, as I had noted in that 2015 national interest, the amazing thing about Muslim voters in India is that since 1947, since the partition, the Muslims in India have never trusted a fellow Muslim as their leader. Never. Jinnah was the last Muslim who a bunch of Indian Muslims trusted as their leader, and those that stayed behind voluntarily, they figured probably that having a Muslim leader and trusting him had not helped, because that led to partition, that also led to families being separated, and that also led to many other problems for them. So they never bought into that. There is a history, complex history that came before that, but I am not going into that complex history right now. The complex history very briefly is that in 1920s, when Mahatma Gandhi was concerned that Congress was still seen as a Hindu party, and he wanted to reach out to Muslims and embrace them and to say, we represent you Muslims as well, he got the Congress party involved in Khilafat movement or the Caliphate movement. That is when the Ottoman Empire was being bound up by Ataturk in Turkey. Now it so happens that that unwittingly, or maybe it was fated to be like that, ended up creating a new Muslim leadership in India. That Muslim leadership that came as part of the Khilafat movement was a pan-Islamic movement for the Ummah, also created the first impulse for Pakistan or for the two-nation theory. So that is something that the Congress, I am sure, regrets, so they don't talk about it. In fact, I have seen even now Congress leaders saying that we should take a leaf out of Gandhi's book in Khilafat movement and get Muslims to join us, but it did not work. And also it split the Muslim leadership. So those who were Indian nationalists stayed back in India. Those who believed in the two-nation theory went away. So that is the brief history of what happened to Congress's Muslim politics or Muslim national politics in India before partition. After partition, what happened? For about 4 decades, India's Muslim trusted the Congress party and members of the Nehru-Gandhi dynasty. Then when they saw Rajiv Gandhi do funny things, Shah Bano case, then is sort of back and forth on the temple mosque issue in Ayodhya, Muslims got disillusioned with him. That disillusionment started then it became cemented in the Hindi heartland with the demolition or destruction of the Babri Masjid in 1992. So the Congress party lost that vote. After the Congress party lost that vote, where did that vote go? That vote did not go to a Muslim leader still. Muslims of India still chose Hindu leaders. So in Uttar Pradesh, it was Mulayam Singh Yadav. In Bihar, it was Lalu Yadav. At some point, Nitish Kumar also, until he was seen as a socialist. Then in other parts of the country where no alternative was available, such an alternative, Muslim vote stayed with the Congress, as say in Maharashtra, for example, or Gujarat. But in states where other such forces like Lalu and Mulayam rose, Muslim vote went there. So in West Bengal, it went to the left, then to Mamta Banerjee. So this is how Muslims chose their own leaders, but remember, all of them were Hindu leaders. So this has been the remarkable story of the evolution of the Muslim voters' mind in independent India during the elections. Now what's happened as a process in that process is that many of these parties describe themselves as secular parties. The underlying message is parties that expect to get the Muslim vote. BJP is described as a non-secular party because that's not a party that expects to get the Muslim vote. In that sense, even Shiv Sena would be described as a non-secular party because they don't expect to get the Muslim vote, although Congress now insists that they are trying to change. We'll see. So you have this background. In fact, my friend Wasim Ahmed, who used to work very closely with VP Singh, he is a politician from the Hindi heartland and a very good political mind, he once told me that how in 1960s, late 1960s, a Muslim party did come up in the Hindi heartland called Muslim Majlis, and it then declined in no time. It joined Sanyukt Vidhayak Dal, the informal coalition against Indira Gandhi, but then got subsumed by socialist politics, and I will come to that also. So what happened in the process? That none of these parties, all these parties thought that they owned the Muslim vote. Why? Because Muslims were afraid of the BJP and RSS. So if you vote for us, we will make sure you are not killed by BJP and RSS, which means for your personal safety, on the fear of your lives, you vote for us. Beyond that, don't have much higher expectations of us, least of all that we will anoint your people as political leaders in India. So look at the record of the Congress party, which has benefited most of all from having this Muslim vote on their side. In the past several decades, they haven't produced one Muslim leader of consequence, and I say this with respect to Salman Khurshid. Congress party had people like Dr. Zakir Hussain, Dr. Fakhruddin Ali Ahmad, and many others, but they never could build a Muslim leader. It could also be because Muslims in India were not so keen to have a Muslim represent them or be their leader. They were still trusting secular Hindus, and that is India's most remarkable story. That has now begun to change, and Owaisi is a very good example of that change. So you have Owaisi now, who grew in a tiny part of Hyderabad, and I've walked around with him in Hyderabad, and he does a lot of work there, and I have seen hoardings in old city of Hyderabad saying ISIS is bad, ISIS does not follow Islam, etc., which is a good thing. Also, he runs a large bunch of educational institutions. In fact, I will share with you a picture that I took at one of those at his Deccan Medical College in the inner city of Hyderabad, and you can see in the classroom, it's a first year MBBS anatomy class if I remember correctly, and you can see the classroom, women outnumber men at least 2:1 if not more. So he is not spreading obscurantism there. He is a Muslim. He looks like a Muslim, he talks like a Muslim, he dresses like a Muslim. He is not somebody who is pressured to be a Bhadralok Muslim. And Owaisi himself, he's got modern education, he's a barrister from Lincoln's Inn. In fact, one lesser known fact about him is that he was a very good cricketer. He represented South Zone University's team, was a fast bowler, also played in Vizzy Trophy. In fact, he was sort of close to being a contemporary of Asaduddin in the same college, Muhammad Asaduddin. Now, this is a new political figure. Similarly, you have another new political figure rise in Assam, Badruddin Ajmal. Now, he is again somebody who is demonized in Assam, because Assam politics, if anything, is much more polarized than politics of the Hindi heartland. One, because of the large percentage of Muslim voters there. Second, because Muslim voters in Assam are concentrated in some constituencies and they tilt the balance there. Unlike Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, where they are widely spread out, in Assam they turn the balance in many constituencies. Some of those happen to be close to the borders with Bangladesh. So that plays quite insidiously and quite effectively. One, in the Assamese belief that they've been overwhelmed by infiltrators from Bangladesh. Most ethnic Assamese will see this in non-communal terms. They will be equally worried about Bengalis Hindu Bengalis coming in from Bangladesh. But the BJP and RSS have been able to work on this. It's been a 35-year project. And in that project, they've been able to build a sufficient support base to say that the threat is from Muslim immigrants from Bangladesh, which means any Muslim who you can presume was not an indigenous Assamese and who was born of parents whose mother tongue was Bengali. Now, Badruddin represents them. He is also getting the vote. So these are the two phenomena which have risen. Owaisi has reached out and he's grown out Probably because he's English speaking, he's very media savvy, he's set up a very modern organization. Also, Hyderabad happens to be much more mainstream or much more center of the heartland than say Guwahati or Assam. Now look at this, look at the picture from the point of view of a young Indian Muslim who would say, look, my parents voted for these secular parties, my grandparents voted for these secular parties, but what did I get? My vote, and the fact is that my vote is valued by so many other parties, has given them all power through these decades, but I got nothing in return. All they do is when they come to power is to offer to set up a Sachar committee. But why does a Sachar committee have to be set up in 2004, which is so many decades after independence? And remember, Muslim vote has been the key to these parties staying in power, not just in UP and Bihar, but also nationally. So I'll take you back to a conversation that I had with Balbir Punj, who's a senior BJP leader, former MP, but also my former colleague. He used to be an editor at the Financial Express. And he once said to me in exasperation in 1996, after Vajpayee's government had been defeated after 13 days. And this is something he said again to me for vindication when Vajpayee's second government was voted out in 1999 with just one vote. He said that, look, Muslims in India have acquired a veto on who will rule India. And why did he say so? He said so because, one, the first Vajpayee government was defeated in 13 days. People were not willing to back it because many parties were scared they will lose the Muslim vote. Once again, it was defeated by one vote for the same reason. And then to further affirm this came UPA 1. In 2004, Congress party got 145 seats, BJP got 138 seats. The gap was only 7. Vajpayee was in power and he had the advantage of being in power. Still, he was not able to put a coalition together. Congress was. Why? Because so many other parties, especially the left in this case, were happy to go or willing to go with the Congress, even if they had to turn up their noses ideologically, because they could not go with a party that Muslims of India did not accept. And also they could not create a situation where a party that the Muslims of India and their Muslim voters in Bengal and not so much in Kerala but Bengal did not accept. They did not want to be seen as people who enabled them to put up a coalition. So that's how 2004 UPA 1 came in. Now that has changed. And how has that changed? After 2014, you can see that Narendra Modi, Amit Shah, they made a little bit of effort to reach out to Muslims here and there, but then they gave up very quickly. And then they followed the principle that's all right. Muslims of India will never vote for us. So let's not even seek their votes. We will fight our battle in a catchment, in the vote catchment area of 80%, which means we are leaving out Muslims, Christians, minorities. The flip side of that has been that because you guys don't vote for us, we give you no power. So you have a situation in India today when Union Cabinet has only one minister who's in charge of minority affairs: President, Vice President, Chief Justice of India, election commissioners, chiefs of armed forces, chiefs of intelligence agencies, top secretaries to ministries, important ministries in India. There are no Muslims anywhere. In fact, there are very few Christians also, because the principle is you don't vote for us, you don't get empowerment, but we will not harm you. So if anything, there are fewer communal riots now than there used to be. This is what the BJP is telling the Muslims today. The young Muslims are saying this is not acceptable to us anymore. And they think that by continuing to vote for Congress, SP, BSP, etc., 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 by default, they are just being taken for granted. And that's why, and that's how people like Owaisi are now rising, because Owaisi talks like a Muslim. He represents their issues. He is not afraid to speak the truth, or what Muslim young people will see the truth, and that is why his appeal is working, and that is why the secular parties are so paranoid about him, because they are worried that now he's made inroads into Maharashtra and Bihar. what happens if he makes inroads into Uttar Pradesh, because if he does that, then all bets are off. So you can do one of two things. Either you can abuse him and you can say, oh, you are sold out, you are indirectly helping the BJP. But then the question that he will ask is, and the question and something that I will endorse is, that have India's Muslim politicians taken the theka or taken the supari upon themselves to sacrifice themselves to help the secular cause, so these so-called secular parties keep winning? Now, if this is the logic of democracy, if he has the vote, other parties have to reach out and make their arrangements with him. And it's quite ridiculous for the Congress party, for example, that in Kerala they can have an almost permanent arrangement with Indian Union Muslim League, but they are afraid of having any arrangement with Owaisi, and they've been shy of having that arrangement with Ajmal as well. Why? Because they don't want to be seen as anti-Hindu. They are worried that Hindus will get upset. Now, Kerala, it doesn't apply because Kerala is too far and IUML leaders are not so visible on national media, etc. And also Kerala does not have an immigration or infiltration, as it's called, issue as there is in Assam. But most importantly, in Kerala, BJP is right now not a challenge, but it's a matter of time before BJP will become a challenge in Kerala as well. So Congress of all parties has got it completely wrong. Instead of trying to keep at least the vote that they had, they got panicky that they were losing the Muslim vote, and that's how the Janeu, the temple visits, the Gotra, the Shiv Bhakt Brahmin, all that stuff came in. It's only now that I hope Congress party realizes, I'm not sure they will, that they cannot become more Hindu than the BJP. Nobody sees any party in India as an anti-Hindu party. And also this is very unflattering towards the Hindus, that to think that they look at their political leaders in purely sectarian terms. So no matter what the Congress party does, no matter what Rahul Gandhi does, they cannot look more Hindu than the BJP. But they can look and act more secular than the BJP. And that is where now these parties have to look at forces like Owaisi differently. So either, what are their options? Either they reach out to him and say Ajmal and other forces like this and make their arrangements with them and be not afraid of sharing their base, because politics, once you have your backs to the wall, once you are fighting such a dominant power in power against you, then you need to build alliances and you need to trade space. That's what politics is all about. Or wait, let time pass. In the course of time, forces like Owaisi's will come and take away whatever is left of your Muslim vote base. Yet another option has emerged for the young Muslim, that is the leftist Islamist alliance. Now that is something that in the current debate in Europe, particularly in France, is being called the Islamo left. We saw some of that come up in northeast Delhi in the anti-CAA movement. But that force, that left Islam force, has severe political limitations, because frankly, even for traditional Muslim voters, this will not be seen as Muslim enough. Maybe this will be seen as too secular. So they are not in a position right now in India to replace the mainstream parties, either mainstream secular parties or mainstream Muslim parties. When I say mainstream Muslim parties, these are parties that represent the Muslim mainstream.